This week's parsha is Parshat Ve'era, and this Rav Torah is based on a shiur I heard from Rav Bernstein. It's in his second 2018 shiur, and what he says is based on the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva's commentary in Shiurei Dat. Now we are opening with a question based on the first two psukim. It says, "Vaydaber Elokeinu Moshe vayomer elav ani Hashem, vayira el Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov ve'el Shakai u'shmi Hashem v'nodati lahem." God spoke to Moses and said to him, "I am Hashem. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shakai, both my name Hashem. I did not make myself known to them." Now, just so we know, when it says the Shin, Daled, and Yud name, right, which is obviously pronounced fairly straightforwardly, we'll just be saying Shakai just to avoid any issues. But just for clarification purposes, because I don't want people to get confused, when we say Shakai, that's what we mean. Fine. So the commentary is asked, why is God kind of differentiating between one name and another name? It's true, we know that they're like different. God has different names, but why here are we kind of saying, oh, they knew me by this name, but not by this name? What does that mean? How does that help us? So this question obviously has many commentaries spanning the ages. There are at least 1,000 years of commentaries up to the present day, and Rav Bernstein again shares the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva's thoughts in Shiurei Dat. And what he says is as follows. First, he prefaces his explanation by just introducing the idea that we often make an association. We're aware that there is a physical realm and there's a spiritual realm, and we know that the physical realm is governed by the laws of nature. That's fine, laws of physics. And then we also have a spiritual realm. And we kind of assume that, when it comes to physical nature, we get it. There are specific laws. When it comes to spiritual nature, that's kind of drifts into this now murky, it's unnatural, it's supernatural. But really, that's not entirely accurate, because even spiritual matters have rules. They also have laws. Now, it might be a different nature, right? It's certainly not physical nature, but that's okay. There are different types of nature. After all, there is human nature. Right? And human nature doesn't always accord with the laws of physics. For example, if a person speaks to an object, the object is not going to move. You speak to a rock, it's not going anywhere. But if you speak to a person, that could make them either move closer to you or further from you, right? Because it's human nature. It's magic. It's not magic. It's a different nature. It's human nature. It's governed by different laws. So the same thing is true when it comes to spiritual nature. That is to say, we are familiar that some materials are fire resistant, but there are also certain people who are fire resistant, like Avraham Avinu. When Avraham Avinu was tossed into the furnace, right, by Nimrod in Ur Kasdim, he escaped completely unscathed. He was not burned by the fire. Now, this is not a miracle in the pure sense of the word. It was simply that the spiritual nature asserted itself over the physical nature, because at some times one has to give over the other. Now, this brings us to the question of God's names. The reason why Hashem has many names is because a name represents one of the ways, a way in which he interacts with the world or with people. For example, some of the most common examples are Elohim. Elohim is God's name, representing his attribute of justice. So too Hashem, right? Hashem is God's four-letter name, the Yud, K, and Vav, K. That represents the attribute of mercy. The reason why God is given two names is because there are two modes of conduct and guidance and interaction with the world. Well, okay, so what about the word Shakai, right? Shin, Dalet, and Yud. What does that represent? What's the connotation of that name? So there's a Gemara in Chagiga that Rav Bernstein quotes that says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the cosmos, they were expanding without limit until God placed a limit and said, die, right? Ani she'amarti la'olami die. I, who said to my world, die, that's enough. And by God saying that's enough, die, he caused the world to stop expanding at the rate at which he was expanding. Now, what that represents now is the concept of the physical nature being limited and overridden by a spiritual concept. That is the idea of Shakai. It is a system whereby there is enough spiritual energy to assert itself over the laws of physical nature. Now, the name Hashem, right, the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name, that represents God acting outside of any system, including a spiritual system. Now, With this in mind, the shiur that brings us back to the difference between the lives of the Avot and the experiences about to happen for Bnei Israel, because there are miracles that happen for both of them, right? There are miracles that happen to Avram Avinu and the rest of the Avot, as well as the Jewish people in Egypt, right? Which is is exactly what's about to happen with the Makot. But Hashem says, when it came to the Avot, I related to them as Kel Shakai, as if to say, when I appeared to the Avot, that was only as Shakai, because the way I related to them was that it's true, there were miracles performed for them, and there were supernatural things happening. However, it was because the Avot individually had enough merit to fund that, if we could use such a word, to finance that kind of interaction. That is to say, the spirituality asserting itself over physical nature. That is the interaction of Shakai. And by the way, this isn't a foreign concept. We see this explicitly in Chumash. If we go to the end of Vayikra, we'll see in the very last parsha in Vayikra is Bechukotai. It says, "Im Bechukotai telechu," right? If you keep my mitzvahs, then rain will come. Beito, right? Rain will come in its time. So that's interesting because here there's a spiritual input, and then there's a physical output, right? There's two things that don't seem to be operating on the same length, but they do, and the Torah explicitly says that. So too, when there's a certain spiritual reality existing in the world, or a person imbues that value enough, then he can override the physical reality. Now, so we see, whenever there's a miracle performed for one of the Avot, it's because he had the spiritual stature to finance that kind of miracle. Now, that was not the situation of the Jewish people in Egypt. They had a very different reality. This is well known, and it's even referenced in the Haggadah when it says that Aaron area, right? You're naked and bereft of mitzvahs. That's not just an assessment for its own sake. Oh, it's good to know the Jewish people had no mitzvahs. No, that means that if miracles are going to happen, they are not going to happen in a way that we've ever seen them before, ever experienced before. There's never been a miracle that has not been financed by the person to whom it occurred, to quote Rav Bernstein. So now, the Jewish people are in a deficit. They're unaware of their spiritual state. They've learned bad habits from the Egyptians. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the beginning of this week's parsha, before he begins the Makot, what does he say? He says he's introducing an entirely new world order at the beginning of our parsha, right? Because he says, now there are miracles coming, but there are miracles that even though you've seen miracles before, you've never seen it happen like this. Why? In what way? Because before you knew me as Kel Shakai. You knew me in that mode. I was never known with the name of Hashem, and Hashem is the name of overriding any system. And the reason why he did that was because the reason why he never did that because it was never necessary. But now it is necessary, and so we see at the beginning of this week's parsha there is a transition of Hashem's interaction with the world, and it's on behalf of the Jewish people. And we'll end it there. Shabbat shalom.